Hello, everyone. This is Todd Talks, and I am joined with James Haeck, who will also talk. So maybe we need to change the title of the show, but we're not going to. He's the lead writer at D&D Beyond, and today we're taking a look at the monk Way of the Shadow, which is arguably one of my favorite monks of all time, especially when you consider its lineage coming a little bit from 3rd edition Assassin, when that was a prestige class. We see some elements in there, but if you're looking for that stealthy monk, that sneaky monk, that monk that is a little bit more tactical, this is kind of the monk for you, right, James?
Oh, absolutely. I think many would consider the Way of Shadows monk to be one of the most fun and most exciting monks, particularly from the player's handbook, but maybe of all the monk subclasses. It's definitely got that sort of rogue-ish assassin-like feel. The text calls it out. You might be called a shadow dancer or a ninja, but all that aside, I think my favorite use for this monk is not necessarily as like a shadowy assassin, but more as a Solid Snake, Sam Fisher style infiltrator. The kind of guy who you could play a totally stealth-based campaign with and not feel the need to have any combat encounters at all. It's just so much fun to. Well, we can get into the details of that later, but that's the way I like to play them.
Yeah, it does kind of evoke characters like, say, Batman or
Mm-hmm.
Garrett from Thief, the video
Mm-hmm.
game. Uh, this is a pretty strong solo character. You know, if I wanted to actually play a solo game, playing a Way of the Shadow monk with maybe the medicine feat or something like that, you know, so I
Mm.
could stitch myself up, which would add to that kind of gritty realism, right? Like you've
Yeah.
really hurt yourself and you're like literally stitching your body together uh, in between your little, you know, kind of James Bondy moments that you're having in D&D. It's quite fun.
Seriously, I think this is a great subclass for a solo style D&D campaign. If you've just got you and another DM, though, know what you're getting into. It's definitely a gritty, stealthy sort of thing to do.
Yeah. What is the thing that you like the most about it and how this functions? You recently wrote an article about your Monk Way of the Shadow 101, your series that you do
Yes.
on each of these subclasses. What strikes you the most?
Well, a Way of the Shadow Monk was actually the first character I made in D&D Fifth Edition.
Oh
I'm
wow.
not usually that way at all. Usually, Paladin is my go-to. I love that style of play. But I had a character from the campaign I was playing before Fifth Edition came out, who I wanted to update to the new rules, and I found that Way of the Shadow is the best way to do it. Back in 3rd edition, there were, in the late days of that edition, there was a class called the Sword Sage, and he was very much a sort of judo style, use foes' power against them and strike from the shadows sort of guy. And this was perfect for it. And I think just by going through the list of class features that this monk has, we can kind of give everyone an idea of what makes this guy so fun to play. Do you think that's a good idea, Todd?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do
So,
this.
uh, right from the start, we already know that this guy is a monk. If you're playing a Way of Shadow character, you've got all the things that a monk would already give you, and that's stuff like unarmored movement, unarmored defense, martial arts, the ability to spend key points, the ability to deflect missiles. So already you've got a certain level of flavor and a certain play style right there. Um, a lot of people associate monks with unarmed combat, just hand-to-hand fighting. But it's important to remember that monks get a number of monk weapons that they can use their dexterity to attack with. That's any simple weapon that isn't heavy or two-handed. So if you want short swords, if you want sickles, quarterstaff, throwing knives, stuff like that, I mean, you don't have to fight with bare hands alone. And that, I think, more than any other monk subclass, comes into play heavily here. Being able to just throw a knife from the shadows and escape unseen feels very right for this style of play.
I mean, almost to a nightmare state of because you do have these abilities that allow you, like if you're in dim or darkness, you can teleport as an action. Like you can, I mean, you're almost at the point, like if you took the mobile feat, you'd be moving around 65 feet per second. I mean, per round, and then you could like throw a knife at somebody and probably like catch it on its way back. Like you could just be teleporting around people and moving and kind of controlling and evading, and it makes you very I don't know, tanky, but you are kind of a nightmare. You are that Batman character of like, I don't know where you're coming from at any given moment.
Mobile is just a very fun feat on monks in general, but especially for Way of Shadow for a number of reasons. So by the time you're third level, right, monks get their subclasses at third level. By the time you're third level, you've got all those things I just talked about: unarmored defense, martial arts, key points, unarmored movement, stuff like flurry of blows, patient defense, step of the wind. You've already got a ton of monk stuff that you can use your key points and other abilities for. And then you unlock your monastic tradition. You can go into Way of Shadow. The very first thing you get at third level is you can spend key points to cast spells.
And that's huge.
It's like, a pretty limited list, but there's a lot of good stuff on it.
Yeah, it's everything you want.
Yeah,
and I mean, monks typically can't cast any spells, but when we're looking at it, wow, these are doozies, and they help the entire party in a lot of interesting ways.
And from a design perspective, I think the choice of a lot of these spells is very interesting. They're almost, with the exception of the one cantrip you get, they're all second level spells, which is the time that you'd get these spells if you were a full spellcaster, right? If you were a wizard, you would get your second level spells at third level, just like this monk. Usually that's not how it works. If you look at the Way of Four Elements monk, or the Eldritch Knight Fighter, or the Arcane Trickster Rogue, these guys are all sort of like 1/3 spellcasters, which means they're at this point they're getting first level spells, and they're not getting second level spells like the Way of Shadows monk until like 5th level or something. It's pushed back a long way. So all of these things come in really strong right out of the gate. You've got spells like Darkness, Dark Vision, Pass Without Trace, one of the best spells in the game, frankly.
And plus
Silence.
Stealth, and not just you.
Yeah, not just you. And you don't leave tracks, which I included in the story segment of the Class 101 article that I wrote earlier this week. If you're in an environment where leaving tracks is a big deal for you, like a snowy environment, then Pass Without Trace's lesser benefits of being untrackable suddenly come into very sharp focus.
It's interesting that at this level, again, like you mentioned, that it's third level, and I almost feel like these spells define in many ways the type of character you want to play, depending on a couple of things in the way that you would interact with feats. So we've got someone who can create darkness, who can create silence. Silence is so powerful for shutting down other casters, and usually you have to be a caster to cast it, but not you. So if you want to shut down a cleric, right, and you just, or like a wizard, go into D&D Beyond, look at the spell list, look at what are the components required. So many of them are vocal. You are shutting down a enormous amount of spells.
Yeah, this is a really interesting thing, because when you get this Shadow Arts feature at third level that lets you cast all these spells, you need to be a little bit careful that you're not shooting yourself in the foot with them too. There is kind of a tactical edge to it, particularly with Darkness and Silence, your two sort of can't see, can't hear, can't speak spells. Darkness is the one that's most obvious because it creates magical darkness. So even creatures with dark vision cannot see within it. In fact, there's a really, truly very limited number of creatures that can see within magical darkness. And even if you try to multi-class to get those abilities, there aren't a lot of ways to do it. The best way, if you want to see through magical darkness, is to take 2 levels in Warlock to get the Devil's Sight invocation, which lets you explicitly see in magical darkness. But the only other ways are really quite esoteric. 11th level rogues, I think, get something like it. Druids can transform into creatures with very limited blind sight. certain familiars. I think that if you are a warlock who gets a pseudo dragon familiar, they have limited blind sight and you can see through their eyes. But it's like there are not a lot of ways to see through magical darkness. This is a pretty
there
hard
isn't
shutdown
currently, but when you look at UA, there is UA that allows you to take, as long as there's not like a prerequisite, one of the invocations from the warlock list without being a warlock. So you could choose Devil's Sight and be able to see in that darkness. You become this very Bane character. This is giving you advantage on all your attack rolls. Every time you punch someone in that darkness, it becomes like I'm concerned about how powerful suddenly the way of the Shadow Monk becomes once you introduce these other feats. On top of that, there is a feat in Unearthed Arcana that is fighting style blind fighting. So you don't even need to really see. You just have that sense, which I think is more evocative for a monk.
Yeah.
But that's you taking. You would have to take a feat that allows you to grab one of the fighter's fighting styles. If you chose blind fighting, that's really interesting to me because it isn't that weird magical, like that story of somehow I got a little bit of a warlock, ability is a little strange, but like a monk who's just, it's very monk-like to be able to have blind fighting.
Right. And just for the record, in case you're not sure quite what we're talking about, there are some feats and abilities in the most recent set of Unearthed Arcana playtest rules that introduce a lot of class variants, including a new fighting style called blind fighting, which means that you no longer suffer penalties for attacking creatures you cannot see. And there is a feat called Fighting Adept, I think. Fighting Initiate that lets you take any fighting style. And suddenly you can just be a monk and you can nab blind fighting, or you can be a monk and you can nab Devil's Sight. And my game design brain is just turning over what you've been saying, Todd. And I'm thinking about the costs and benefits of taking blind fighting as a monk versus taking Devil's Sight with a feat just like that from UA. And it's very interesting because Devil's Sight does seem better. You can see completely in the darkness. But there is a case in which blind fighting might be better for you, and it's if you wind up fighting invisible creatures. Because so Devil's Sight is very powerful within its small niche, and it's a niche that you use a lot. So it might just be worth it always because of that. But if your DM suddenly throws ghosts or invisible stalkers or spellcasters with invisibility, then maybe blind fighting is actually the way you want to go.
And that is a really good point, because there are a lot of creatures that can use that invisibility and to be able to nullify that advantage. Well, blind fighting specifically states right now, as it is as a fighting style, being on you are now unable to see it. I'm stuttering a lot. Being unable to see a creature does not impose disadvantage on your attack rolls against it, provided that creature isn't hidden from you. Doesn't mean that it doesn't have advantage against you, right?
So, if you want to truly negate all of this against you, then there is a feat that already exists in the player's handbook. It's one of the first feats you'll ever see, called Alert. And it has a panoply of great benefits. You gain a +5 to initiative, but also it means that foes that this is a very challengingly worded thing. Usually when you're fighting in darkness, where you and your foe cannot see you, you both have the same advantages and disadvantages. You can't see one another, and the other person can't see you. So one gives advantage, the other gives disadvantage. They cancel out. You're fighting normally.
Yeah.
But Alert makes it so that you no longer suffer a disadvantage from unseen foes attacking you. So it's like the inverse of what blind fighting does for you.
Right.
So if you've got both of them, suddenly you have all the advantages in the world, and so you're suffering none of the drawbacks. You paid 2 feats for it, but you're going to be doing this stuff so much, it might be worth it. Plus all the other side benefits that alert will give you.
And yeah, plus you're getting that giant bonus to which you're going to already be really high up there because you're going to want a healthy dexterity as a monk. You're going to be the first one in combat.
Yes,
and then you cannot be surprised. It's an interesting threat. So there's a lot that can be done with those initial spells. So you could be fighting in darkness.
Yeah. Oh,
invisibility doesn't matter.
I've been totally sidetracked. There's one more. There's one more shoot yourself in the foot moment that you should be aware of if you're playing this with silence. Right. One of the great benefits of silence is that casting a spell that includes verbal components is impossible within the area of silence. It's great for shutting down spellcasters.
Yeah.
But all of the spells that you get through your Shadow Arts feature, Pass Without Trace, Dark Vision, Darkness, they all do have verbal components. So you
you have to use components though?
Yes, so you don't have to provide material components, but somatic and verbal components, if they have it, you do still have to use them. So avoid being within your own silence unless, I don't know, you've got a garrote and you're getting someone within the area of silence. If you're thinking of casting spells, you better be outside of that zone.
Well, and beyond that, isn't Pass Without Trace concentration, and so is silence and darkness.
Yes, there are a lot of concentration spells.
Yeah,
here,
so you're choosing how to jump into that combat.
Precisely.
Yeah,
precisely.
It is interesting if you get Mage Slayer as a feat, and all you do is silence casters and run up to them and punch the crap out of them.
Oh my gosh,
that's your big thing.
I mean, that's a great conceit for a character, being someone who is specifically a mage assassin. Very cool.
Yeah. You've got a story already.
Yeah, I mean, just by taking one subclass and one feat, you may be starting at 4th level or something like that, but that is already a strong character concept.
Yeah, and a character who maybe even hates magic, and the way they create their key points, they've just learned almost in that way of that old radio drama, The Shadow. They convince you of a spell existing, right? Like this,
very cool.
Maybe it's not even really a magical effect for you in your head, right? Like you hate magic users, but you've evolved because maybe you have this very maybe you grew up in a very mage wizard spellcaster centric world that you have been a victim of that, and you've developed this kind of innate ability, almost in kind of an X-Men kind of way. How to adapt into that environment. So.
Yeah. I mean, look at all the story potential we've already got, and this character is
we're at 3rd level,
level 3.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, I'd probably go very inhuman with this too, since I could get dark vision and everything else.
I mean, that's very Bruce Wayne now. Yeah. If you've gone very inhuman with it too, there are a lot of races that make for good Way of the Shadow Monks. Very inhuman. This class can be feat hungry, so anything that gets you an extra feat is definitely good. I talked about all of the sort of core player's handbook races that would be good for this in the article that I wrote earlier this week, but there are a lot of pretty cool options that go outside the core 3 rule books. I think Tabaxi is a very fun option for a Way of the Shadow Monk. Very cool. I mean,
moving around pre nimbly bimbly.
You're a black cat just slinking through the alleys of Baldur's Gate. I mean, it's perfect. Playing someone playing anything that can fly, a winged feral tiefling from Sword Coast, and Aarakocra from Elemental Evil player companion.
Oh
wow. Suddenly you're just out of control, flying all over the place. Kenku are very cool. They get dexterity and wisdom, which is everything you want for a monk, and they've also got that mimicry ability, the forgery ability. You're a very sneaky guy if you're playing a Kenku.
I do like that. Yeah. I don't normally play Kenku, but a Kenku Way of the Shadow Monk makes a lot of sense. And silence is kind of hilarious for them to be casting as well. Yeah. There
are just a lot of fun races that supplement the sneaky abilities the Way of Shadow Monks already get. We spent a lot of time on just the very first ability.
Yeah,
that
we
these
should
guys
we
can
should
get.
definitely move on. We do have a few questions in chat.
Yeah.
If you multi-class a Shadow Monk with Rogue, what Rogue subclass do you think would work best?
Oh, I mean, assassin.
Yeah.
It's almost not a question.
Yeah, what's funny is, again, as we kind of started this off, I played my character Averin as Rogue Prestige class Assassin, and the Prestige class for Assassin in 3rd edition, it's literally the spell list.
Yeah.
That we see today in the way of the Shadow Monk. You are the sneakiest boy now. And you're dropping those crits. Now, you're not doing necessarily a ton of damage, but it has some really lovely synergy, I would say. And then you're getting expertise and stealth and everything else.
I'm trying to think of what some other rogue subclasses. Though Assassin is very obvious, but we don't want to be obvious here. I think the Inquisitive Rogue is an interesting option too, if you want to be a more sleuthy,
studious,
Sherlock Holmesy sort of sneaky guy. And I'm talking about a very specific sort of idea of Sherlock Holmes too. I'm thinking of like the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes,
which is weirdly a very is
good
the
Holmes.
most accurate version of Sherlock Holmes.
I know, it's a very good Holmes. I just watched that movie like 2 days ago.
Yeah, I have read every single Sherlock Holmes story maybe 3 or 4 times, and that is not. I mean, the book is this thick with tiny type. So what you learn very quickly about Sherlock Holmes is he's nightmarishly strong, and almost never shows it. And he is well versed in several martial art forms, and it comes to bear 2 or 3 times in the books. But he is a martial arts expert. And very good at analyzing his opponents and hitting them where it hurts, which is all what the Inquisitive is about. So he rounds out that Sherlock Holmes ness about it all. I think Thief is very strong.
Thief can be good. Yeah, Thief is a little bit. It feels a bit vanilla, but if you just want to be an even better infiltrator than you already are, great, go for it.
Arcane Trickster gets real weird because you now are you are the ultimate ninja, in my opinion, because you have Invisible Mage Hand. You can get the keys off the guard. You're hiding in the shadows. Eventually, you can become invisible just by existing.
I'm personally, I haven't thought about Arcane Trickster Shadow Monk combo too much. I feel like I would get overwhelmed by the different types of spellcasting and key points and all that, and I'd be like, make it stop. But I think this could be fun. I need to think about it a little bit longer.
Yes, and somewhat in that similar vein, we have another question in chat. What do you think about Githzerai, Way of the Shadow Monk? I think it's fantastic. Who knows how much light there is in Limbo? That's getting you access to spells like Shield, Detect Thoughts, Mage Hand. That does kind of round out a really nasty monk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Githzerai are great monks. Getting that shield is a hard target.
Yeah.
You're going to be super, super, super tough.
Yeah, Githzerai are super good monks just in general. And pairing that with, you can pair a Githzerai with any monk subclass and have a great time with it. But Way of Shadow, particularly with all of those, with like Detect Thoughts, being able to like just mentally reach out and see who is your target or who's got the MacGuffin, and being able to just select them out of a crowd. Whoa, very cool.
Yeah, I know that someone mentioned Mask of Many Faces. Technically, Mask of Many Faces, if you wanted that Warlock feat, in UA, you could do that. That does make you a nightmare. And if you added, the actor fee on top of that. What's great about this is it's a great base, and you have to add your role play to it afterwards. And I think that the feats don't necessarily have to be combat feats. I might take things like expertise in persuasion or deception.
I think actor is a surprisingly good feat for this class, especially if you think that if you're leaning into the infiltrator feeling rather than the assassin. Like a more Bond secret agent sort of guy rather than a shadowy killer, but a shadowy infiltrator.
And that makes it a little bit more fun, because I do like having an ability in D&D that I don't pop off all the time. Like you're just this guy who's like maybe that's what I like about, like, I like playing characters who are very persuasive and tricksy, and to have a character who just doesn't do anything until the moment requires it, and then you're like, whoa, what the you're a monk? Like, that's really fun. Like, the bard doesn't have to be the talker. So you can mix that up with some feats.
I think that this monk is especially good as a kind of like support debuff sort of guy if you're really thinking about combat tactics, because at 5th level every monk gets stunning strike, which is ridiculously powerful. You stun a creature, possibly skipping, almost guaranteed skipping their next turn. So even if you don't do a ton of damage when you drop out of stealth, if you manage to land a telling stunning strike on one big dude, the rest of your party can just rush in and be like, whoop, got him, carved him up for you, and then you're just out of there. Speaking of which, I want to move on to the next
we really should, because there's it can never like end, like crush your feet, stuff like that, where you knock someone back 5 feet. All kinds of stuff you can be doing.
Because this one, I think, these next two actually are the ones that I think require the most understanding and the most communication between a player and a dungeon master. I'll talk about them together, actually. The first one you get at 6th level is called Shadowstep, and it's one that anyone who plays an assassin or an infiltrator wants. And it's, while you are in dim light or darkness, right? Go to the player's handbook, make sure you know how dim light works. That's including torchlight, direct torchlight. As a bonus action, you can teleport up to 60 feet between that dim light or darkness and another area of dim light or darkness. And then you have advantage on the first melee attack you make before the end of that turn. So you are just, you're moving in, you're moving out, you're just flitting all over the place, but only as long as there is shadowy illumination or pure darkness around. And this can be challenging if you're a player in a campaign whose dungeon master doesn't really think about that sort of thing. There are plenty of campaigns that I've been in where it's just like, yeah, this dungeon room is 100 feet wide in all directions, and it's brightly illuminated. And we're like, how? And the dungeon master's like, it doesn't matter. You're here to fight a thing. It can be lit up like a stadium for all I care, because it's the easiest way to get you to fight the thing. And so if you've got a dungeon master like that, you're going to have a challenging time playing this guy. So it's just talk to them. Talk to them like the adults you are. Let them know that my character relies a lot on being able to weave in and out of shadows, and it's not overpowered for you to make like pools of darkness and stuff. It's just it's how I'm supposed to be playing. It's how it's most fun for me to play.
Yeah, and I would be sorely tempted to, if you are dealing with a dungeon master and you're playing Way of the Shadows Monk, my advice would be maybe take Mage Initiate and grab yourself, not for like anything. Well, I mean, you could grab Shield, right? Which is the first level, right? Shield is first level, I believe. So that's really strong. Then you get the cantrip for Control Flame.
Oh,
and now
that's very thief.
From 60 feet away, we're talking about you can extinguish flames in a very specific direction. You can do it in a circle, you can do it at distance. You can, with Control Flames, it says you double or halve the area of bright light and dim light cast by the flame, change its color, all of this for an hour. In fact, you can do some very sneaky things. And then there's that evocative thing of you can make the flames look like objects or spread as distraction. I feel like this is one of the most powerful tools for, just as a cantrip, this is extremely powerful. And for the Way of the Shadow Monk, this also solves your issue with a dungeon master who isn't thinking about like how well lit the room is.
In the original game Thief, which you mentioned earlier, Todd,
which is my favorite video game of all time.
It's a great game.
It's right up there with like Control, which came out recently.
It's a game that I haven't played personally, but I love to watch a series on YouTube called Game Maker's Toolkit, and the guy who runs that series loves Thief also, so I've heard a lot about it. One of the things about that game is that it includes a lot of terrain types that specifically interact with the way stealth works. There are, there are grassy areas that are quiet to walk on. There are tiled floors that are loud to walk on. There are torches. And one, that's just good for a dungeon master to think about if you've got stealthy characters. How easy is it to be stealthy in what way, in what area? But it also gives the main character tools with which to deal with it. Specifically, two types of arrows. Arrows that spread a patch of moss on the ground.
I love it. It's
silencing.
The best. It's so good.
And arrows that cause like water balloon arrows, basically, that can douse flames. And giving the monk tools like the silence spell, the darkness spell, taking Mage Initiate to get control flames, all of those tools that let you manipulate the things that make stealth easy or difficult within an environment. It's just a very galaxy brain sort of fun way to play a stealth character. Especially if you're playing in a one-on-one campaign like we were talking about earlier, where not being detected is paramount to your survival.
Yes. So, I mean, with Mage Initiate, we'd probably go control flames, right?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
I think it'd be real hard not to do. I don't know if there's anything that makes you a little bit quieter at that point. I mean, certainly you have message and stuff like that. You've got True Strike.
No,
there's Mold Earth. So
there's nothing like the muffle spell in the Elder Scrolls games, as far as I know, that just like makes your footsteps quieter.
No, I mean you got Featherfall. I could see you using that. We've got Absorb Elements. We've got False Lights. I'm sorry that we're doing this on the fly, but it is kind of interesting. You'd be hard pressed not to use Sleep. Is pretty strong, but Shield, I think Shield you get the most mileage out of in a pinch. So I think I'd probably go that.
I think you could get some very interesting mileage out of the Alarm spell if you're like trying to take care of someone in a room and you place an alarm so you know when you have to get out of there.
Well, and Snare too. I mean,
Snare.
If you're really waiting for it. So let's look at Mold Earth for one. Humor me.
I'll humor you.
if you target an area of loose earth, you can instantly excavate it, move it along the ground, and deposit it up to 5 feet away. The moment doesn't have to. This movement doesn't have to force to cause damage. You can cause different colors to happen with the dirt. It's a lot like Control Flame. If the dirt or stone you target is on the ground, you can use it you can cause it to become difficult terrain. Alternately, you can cause the ground to become normal terrain if it is already difficult terrain, and that change lasts for an hour. I'd take Mold Earth, and I would carry Earth with me. And I mean, you
I'm infiltrating with my bag of rocks,
right? Yeah. I'd be throwing that dirt and spreading it around. I mean, it'd be great to have plant growth, right? Like we talked about, to like simulate that, like the moss is growing kind of effect, but
or like cause ivy to grow up a chimney and then just climb up it. If you've got a DM who is willing to humor you with environmental stuff like this, you've got a DMing demigod on your side, and you should cherish them.
That's them showing you quite a bit of love. Yeah, for sure. So, but yeah, let's move along, since I'm easily distracted and obsessed with a new character. Am I rolling up a way of the shadows right now?
So we've got another shadow-based ability here. So everything we just said about making sure you and your DM are talking about how to use light in a way that's interesting and really getting into the level design of their encounters, that applies to this next feature that you gain at 11th level also. So this is Cloak of Shadows. And while you're in an area of dim light or darkness, just like before, you can use your action to become invisible. And just like the spell Invisibility, you remain invisible until you make an attack, cast a spell, or, and this is new, are in an area of bright light. So you've left the darkness or you've left the shadows, your invisibility just ends. This is awesome. It's at will invisibility. Its only drawback is that it is an action to do. So you can't leap in you can't teleport in as a bonus action,
Mhm.
make an attack, and then turn invisible, right? You don't have enough actions to do that, unless I guess you've dipped into fighter and gained an action surge, which
I
we're in
know.
too deep, Todd.
Ye old action surge. It's like everyone does it. Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, this is a great tool. As long as no one is like directly looking at you, you have a second to go invisible. Can you hear the motorcycle man outside my window?
No, you're fine. I can hear
Okay.
it, but barely. You're okay.
Okay. This actually makes me think a little bit of Among Us, the hidden role game that people are losing their minds over right now.
Oh,
Because if you are the imposter in Among Us, there are a lot of vents all throughout the space station where you can kill someone and then instantly or almost instantly slip away in. It won't save your butt if someone was looking right at you, but as long as you were able to commit your perfect crime unseen, you're able to just slip out of there undetected. So I don't know, if you're loving Among Us at the moment, maybe Way of Shadows Monk is a very fun sort of way to emulate that in D&D.
So yeah, so that is our capstone, correct?
No, there's one more. There's one
more.
Might as well just knock it out of the way right now. It's Opportunist, and you gain it at 17th level. And it's whenever a creature within 5 feet of you is hit by an attack made by someone else, you can use your reaction to make a melee attack against that creature. It's nothing mind-blowing, but it's a great bit of teamwork for this monk to take advantage of your friends attacking the same guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun. Yeah, nothing mind-blowing, but it's a great teamwork ability.
You're already so tough by now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've hit 17th level. You're already like so tough as a monk. Yeah, I know it's not the shiniest of capstones, I would say, for monks or a lot of subclasses, but this is strong.
Yeah, it's kind of like a little token to throw to you when you're out of your element. You don't really want to be fighting toe to toe with other creatures, but as long as you're there, let's give you a little bit of something so you're still doing something in the fight.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. This is kind of a feat heavy subclass because depending on what feat you take, you suddenly very much change the scope of what the subclass can be. You can be that James Bond. You can be that thief. You can be that ninja assassin. You can be the Konami game. I forget. Oh my god.
Talking about Metal Gear?
Yeah, Metal Gear.
Yeah.
You can do all these things, and it's nice because everyone's going to have a different vision of what the way of the Shadow Monk is going to be. I am pretty charmed by the idea of a person who is always hiding themselves being a Shadow Monk.
Like hiding their identity?
Yeah, well, hiding the fact that they are a Shadow Monk. Like they're just dressed normal, and then they pop off, right? And maybe they're using Mask of Many Faces, or maybe they're just using a disguise kit. You've got a disguise kit on you, and this is what you're good at. I mean, who's to say what you're doing, because you're so good at being stealthy anyways, and that makes it kind of more fun. That's why I like blind fighting as well, because you are not going full into that magic.
Your face has gone just a bit fuzzy for me, Todd.
Oh,
falling just slightly out of focus.
Well, I'm just using my powers.
Todd is casting blur on his end.
Yeah. When you want to get that blur in there. By will alone, I blurred out again. I can't turn my face the other way. Okay, wow.
There you are.
I understand you, camera. There you go. Yeah. So this is what I like about this. The possibilities are kind of endless with the way of the Shadow Monk, and it reminded me of. I remember when they formed the C team over at Penny Arcade, and Kate Welch decided to be a Way of the Shadow Monk, and her and Jerry Holkins
is Way of the Shadows, isn't she?
Yeah. So Rosie is a Way of the Shadows monk who's kind of a gangster, and you're kind of in the family because you take the last name Bee Stinger, and she does that, and that's like a fascinating example of because that is such a role play heavy show. It's such a role play heavy character that is combat focused, but not usually scrapping unless they need to. But when they do, it's terrifying. And they had this wonderful discussion between her and Jerry Holkins her dungeon master about what it means to be someone who is kind of a wallflower or someone who is in the shadows. Why do you like being in darkness? Not only in combat, but in general. Is there something that you enjoy? And she came up with this very interesting idea of to see the starlight brighter by creating darkness. I always thought that was very charming. And that shows you how far you can pull a character. Yeah. Is subclass does not need to be a reason. You can ask yourself, why am I like this when I fight? In a role-playing perspective. And I think that's a very good thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, that is the joy of D&D for me, is being able to tease out what the reality is, what the truth is of all these game mechanics that are given to us. And you can go in a bit too deep. You can get lost in the weeds of dragons aren't realistic, or how are they able to fly, stuff like that. When it's just like, if you accept as a given that you are able to shoot darkness from your hands and teleport through it, thinking through what that means for a person, that's the heart of the game. Absolutely.
We got some real quick questions. We do have obviously someone mentioned Mask of Many Faces, which is very powerful. Well, when is the best time for us to multiclass a Shadow Monk after 6th level? I don't know that I would leave. 6th level feels pretty good, but you get a lot of stuff as Monk.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
You're definitely right that I think for things like Devil's Sight, Mask of Many Faces, blind fighting, stuff like that, if your DM will allow it, using the Unearthed Arcana feat to grab those rather than multiclassing is probably the right way to go.
And probably. I don't want to leave until 6th level. I want that Shadowstep feature.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say like I wouldn't leave until I got that, and then come back. I'd probably pull up 3 levels of Assassin, if I wanted to be that kind of character, and drop back into Monk, because Monk gets something. Listen, like at 7th level, they're getting evasion, stillness of mind. They're getting ability score improvement at 8th, unarmed movement improvement at 9th. I mean, there's no level that the Monk isn't getting something just spot on strong. Yeah. So it's a hard thing to decide to ever leave, and I would be more focused maybe on supplementing those abilities with feats, because as we already demonstrated with Mage Initiate and all of these other Unearthed Arcana that are coming out for feats. You can really get a lot more customization. We're not even talking about Battlemaster stuff.
The unarmored movement improvement at 9th level that lets you run up vertical surfaces and across liquid is just it's so perfect. I was gonna say dip out at 6, but now I'm thinking maybe go all the way up to Monk 9. Get that. Yeah, go all the way up to Monk 9, get the ability to run up walls, and then maybe take 3 levels of Rogue, get Assassinate, stuff like that.
Get that mobility, be the Flash.
Yeah. Because like your 10th level stuff, Purity of Body, immune to disease and poison, that's not nothing, but it's not as cool as running up walls. IMO.
Yeah, running up walls is pretty fun. We used to, weirdly enough, my friends and I used to practice that. We used to run at walls so fast and then learn to like keep walking up a wall. It's a real thing you can do. I don't recommend it. I took a lot of hits.
Crazy free runners.
You have to be used to falling and hurting yourself all over and over again. So please don't do that. I don't recommend it. I don't know how many times I knocked the wind out of myself trying to run up a wall. The other question is, what's a great party for members of the Shadow Monk? And this is something I would love to play because I love themed groups. Like my Artificer, my Artificer Intelligence group, that's all Artificers, is really fun. But if you want to do a Shadow party, Shadow Monk, Shadow Sorcerer, Warlock with Devil's Sight,
Gloomstalker Ranger. I'm going to be covering that guy.
Gloomstalker Ranger has to be in the mix.
Next, I think that might be my next class 101, Gloomstalker.
Yeah.
Or it's soon anyway. It's the next Ranger I'm doing.
The 4 of you are like some hit squad. Like, I mean, and the Shadow Sorcerer is interesting because you're popping in. You're able to pop in that darkness as well, and you can send that Shadow Hound out there,
Oh,
that Hound of
man.
Ill Omen, and it's got advantage on. It gives that Shadow Monk, advantage on attacks, and it can pass those things. You're like a mean, dark, evil party, and someone I think needs to take medicine, to like stitch someone up.
Play that party in a freaking Underdark Menzoberranzan social intrigue game. Oh
Yeah.
my god, you're a bunch of thieves and assassins working for Drow high houses in Menzoberranzan, and you're dealing with like Lolthite cults, with other demon lord cults. You're handling the politics of the backstab friendly Drow machine of evil down there. Oh my god, there's a lot. There's a great potential for a campaign in that.
There's an argument for the armor infiltrator, because they have
Oh,
full play armor.
yes.
Yeah, full play armor that they don't have disadvantage on stealth checks.
When your tank is the infiltrator armorer,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you can eventually, right around 6th level, I believe, you can start making infusions like, Cloak of Elvenkind, Boots of Elvenkind. You're getting advantages on these things. Also, Alchemist, really strong. You're making potions for that infiltration, so people are getting levitation, and they're getting those really high level heals. And it kind of fits that gritty world of like, I'm going to just inject myself with this stuff real quick, and then we're going to get into combat.
And like, you don't even have to be all Drow in a situation like that. And I could see Dwergar, of course. I could see Gith, right? There's a bunch of mind flayers in the Underdark.
Neblin, man, come on.
Yeah, Deep Gnome.
All shadow gnome infiltrators. just popping out of the shadows, just causing trouble.
The freaking borrowers of death.
Just ninja gnomes. Ninja Gnomes is the name of the show.
Yeah.
No one expects it. If you want to go way off in the weeds, all goblins. Everyone's got Fury of the Small. You find that one target you all want to kill, and it's just taking massive amounts of damage all at once. Everyone does Fury of the Small. It takes like 20 points of damage for everyone. Everyone's got advantage. It just dies.
All goblins, or even all goblinoids, throwing a bugbear and a hobgoblin into your group, to, one of your guys is the heavy, the other guy is kind of your tactical expert.
Yeah. There's a lot of fun to be done. Sorry, I love the idea of a stealth party. It's
my god, Todd, you're gonna give me ideas like this.
Yeah. I don't get to play D&D enough, guys. That's why my mind's always like this.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good. There's a lot of party cohesion there. Again, don't dismiss any artificer, because they can make the stealthiest of magical items in the entire game, including Gloves of Thievery for sleight of hand. I think that's +5. That's what my wife uses. She uses all of those stealth items, and she's like untouchable. Like you just can't find her. So that's my recommendation there. We got about 10 minutes left. Do we have any more questions? Because we did have a secondary topic, but I don't feel like
I don't feel like we can do it justice in 10 minutes.
No, but we are going to do in the future. We are going to talk about adventure design, and possibly a little bit about outlining adventures as well, depending. But if you have any more questions about being stealthy, being shadowy, it does take in a big buy-in from your dungeon master, certainly.
As long as we're talking about shadows, we can talk about a little bit about environmental design and counter design from the DMing perspective. I think that's
a good thing to be talking about. Like, how do you make it fun for them and fun for yourself?
I would say the first thing you can do in terms of learning how to make a good stealth D&D game is to play some stealth video games. Because you will find that if you're playing a stealth D&D game, D&D is a fairly tactical sort of game, so you'll want to play a game that really digs into the tactical elements of stealth and movement, of sight lines, of sounds you're making, because all of a sudden stealth. I'm getting ahead of myself, because stealth in D&D is an intentionally broad and somewhat undefined subsystem that is governed largely by sightlines, visibility, whether or not you're obscured, and stealth checks, the ability to actively choose to enter a state of hiding. And you may find if you want to run a game based entirely around D&D stealth, you may have to make some calls that add specificity to an intentionally somewhat open-ended rules system. Because in a stealth game, you never want it to be unclear if an action you're going to take is going to result in you being in you losing cover, losing stealth.
Mm-hmm.
The only time that should ever be a thing is when you screw up. If you screw up by not checking around a corner or by not, noticing the type of terrain you're on, that's your fault. It feels okay when you screwed up and it's your fault you got caught. It doesn't feel good when the player from their perspective is doing everything right, and suddenly
Mm-hmm.
there's some weird gotcha or there's a mechanic they didn't know about, and it's like, oh, you failed.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
that's
think
it.
like you said, playing that video game for a minute is gonna teach you kind of like the joys of stealth.
Mm-hmm.
I as a DM, I think you should be thinking about where are the fire sources, like how much light is coming from, say, the kitchen's fire. That seems like something you can't extinguish easily, but the torches you maybe can.
Mm-hmm.
The sound of your feet on the stone, like I'd be tempted myself personally. I'm just making a cantrip that creates moss. Like
I think that's a great idea.
I would manipulate druid craft, right? I think I would probably, if you really wanted to go that direction for that thief feel, you'd mage initiate into druid. There's a little bit more synergy there. You are missing out on shield, but you're controlling the elements around you to your advantage. You can drop fog, stuff like that.
Oh, fog cloud. That's a good spell to have on hand.
Yeah. Especially if you've gone blind fighting anyways.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a fantastic spell, and it'll go around the corners for everybody.
Yeah.
I think also just watching, think of spy type movies. Like even that man for a moment, has this moment where he like sneaks in there, gets past the cameras. Your job as a dungeon master is to help create that fantasy for that player.
When you create a space for a stealth game as a dungeon master, or at least for a game where one or more characters is highly interested in stealth, you will seem like a demigod level DM to them if you think actively about where they can be stealthy easily.
Yeah.
And it's a very fine line to ride, because you want to make them feel like they're coming up with it. If they feel like you have given them a railroady stealth path that is off the beaten track from the non-stealth path, then they'll be like, okay, well, I'll play this mini game for you. But if you can just include things like waist-high hedges, or areas where walls have blocked torchlight, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you aren't too obvious about it, you're just obvious enough about it, then you open up basically a creative sandbox for players to explore, stretch their exploration and stealth muscles, and kind of create their own way of tackling an area.
Batman Arkham series.
Oh, Arkham
I play
Asylum.
all of those.
Yes.
Mage initiate into jump and try to do stealth jumps.
Mm-hmm.
So you like jump on to like a gargoyle that is like, like 100 feet up, and you're just like, that stuff gets really interesting. But yeah, you've got to live. You have to buy into that fantasy. We got a couple other questions here real quick.
Yeah, let's take them.
One one's kind of interesting. Like, my DM is allowing me to play a Way of Mercy monk.
Ooh.
But I'm thinking of doing Way of Shadow. Which would you choose? There's a lot of advantages to the Way of Mercy monk. One is that not nausea. I don't know what that's called, but it creates a gas around you that gives you kind of cover. So it is in that kind of Batman-like vein. Like, maybe you're not, casting darkness, but you're capable of doing healing. You're capable of doing a lot more harm. And you can get some of the extra cover and dropping down gas. You're like this kind of monk medicine alchemist, which which fits very well in that kind of way of the Shadows role. It's not going to be as powerful in those ways because it is primarily healing. So it really depends on your flavor, whether you want to do that or the other. Do you want to do healing as a monk and a little extra damage, or do you want to be the stealthiest of stealth?
Yeah, I agree. I think for a regular D&D campaign where you and your DM and players haven't like explicitly collaborated a little bit to create scenarios that are tailored to your characters, Way of Mercy is probably an easier fit, and requires a little bit of less legwork and level design on the part of you and your DM. But if you want to go that extra effort, then Way of Shadow is a totally wild and woolly playstyle.
I got a great answer for a question coming up here, but one thing someone mentioned, yes, it's a great combo using Mage Slayer with Shadow Monks because, I mean, hey, we can sneak into any wizard tower and we're going to come and get you.
Yeah.
And then we're going to shut you down.
Oh yeah.
It's a nightmare scenario, but how would you make my Barbarian stealthy Shadow? I would have someone else do it. I think casting Silence on a Barbarian is terrifying. It's just coming at you. I can't think of anything. There's no Shadowfell Barbarian right now.
So I have a player in my current campaign. My stepbrother is playing a goblin swashbuckler rogue who's taken a 1 or 2 level dip into Barbarian.
Oh my god.
And he's totally roguey, very stealthy, all of that. You know, he's got all this panache because he's a swashbuckler. He's very Ferengi, really, Deep Space Nine. But he's got this wild thing where he will fly into a rage in the middle of combat and just start hammering on people. And because of his rage, he gets resistance to all physical damage. And because of his rogue's uncanny dodge ability, he can quarter that damage further once per turn. So he's like, you know, Yoda in the prequels, flipping all over the place, taking quarter damage from my big boss monsters. And I'm like, I can't stop this guy. It's very, very, very
That's
funny.
Fascinating. Yeah. How does he get angry? Like, does he have like a way that he gets angry?
He's got a short fuse. He's the kind of guy who gets pissed off by things going wrong in small ways, right? He's very meticulous and precise, and so when he's just off by a hair, it's like, ugh!
Oh, I like
goes
that.
In.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, the first time you miss creates rage. That's kind of fun. Boy, swashbuckler Barbarian is...
Yeah, because he's getting sneak attack when he's all on his own because of swashbuckler.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense too for like a pirate themed game.
Yeah.
That's pretty fantastic. Yeah, and you're getting expertise in that stealth and stuff. I like it. I like that quite a lot. The more I think about it, when I think about like Black Sails, which is an excellent show.
Oh yeah, I should watch Black Sails.
Some of those big beefy boys are still very stealthy, which is big being stealthy is far scarier than small being stealthy. You know, no one wants to see an 8-foot guy be quiet. Like, I don't like that.
I'm thinking about that Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movie again. We got the French-speaking giant who just kind of shows up.
So lovely. Oh,
love that.
I love that scene. It's so
love
polite.
That movie.
The most polite of fights.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have. I'm surprised that we filled the time for Way of the Shadow Monk. It's fantastic. Go build one tomorrow. Also, check out the article that James Haeck has already written. James Haeck is the person that you're talking to right now. That I'm talking to, rather. And that link will be in Twitch chat, and it will also be in this YouTube video as well. But I hope that gives you kind of like an idea of all the things you can be doing with this one subclass, which is why I love D&D subclasses, because you never know what road they will take you. James Haeck, thank you so much for joining me yet again and dropping your big knowledge. If you didn't know, James has been a co-writer on several D&D books. From Wildmount to all kinds of other things, Taldori, and you could list them off better than I can because you did it, as well as several DM's Guild products. But he's in the know. Read his articles; they're so exceptionally helpful.
Thank you so much. Great being on the show as always. I love talking about subclasses with you, Todd, because the wildest ideas come out.
Yeah, I'm a weird one. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope we answered most of your questions, and we will see you next week. Bye.
See you around.